pizza and steal the net seems to be a single penny. Good morning, Torbay. Welcome to Breakfast Bytes. Here we are. I think this is our fifth in the series, isn't it, Emily?
I think so, Steve. Yeah.
That's good, and it's great to see you there. We've all logged in. I've got a wonderful panel this morning going to tell us how it's all going, and how, as we ease lockdown, whatever that means to us and the business community. Emily's going to be moderating for us today. I've got Sir Richard Ibbotson, Chair of Torbay and South Devon NHS Foundation Trust. We have James Arnold from Bay Deliveries and talking about keep it local. Of course, we've got Jim in the kitchen finding out what he's been cooking up for us this week with Torbay Weekly. And last but not least, we have a long-standing friend, Mark Wright from Majestic Tours. He's going to be talking to us about running a tour operator in the current climate, and that could be interesting. I'm sure Mark will give us all the answers. so just as a brief intro for those who haven't been involved with one of these before, the Torbay Business Forum is a group of volunteers who concentrate on helping the Torbay economy to thrive and grow. And in recent times, helping it to survive, I have to admit. But we look at business, we look at infrastructure, and we look at skills. And you see a merry bunch of folks. We're very, very conscious of our naturally inspiring environment and the reason that people not only live here, but want to work here. And if people are working here, we can create local wealth. Now, what we've been through is quite an amazing situation. And Emily, if we could have the next slide, please. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about this, and we had Alison Hernandez on, and we talk about some people will call this the U-bend of change. Rather than a U-bend, we've got to look at this this curve as to where we've been. We were in the denial stage. This isn't going to happen. The resistance. No, this really isn't happening. Exploration. Okay, so how can we get out of this? And then the commitment to change. And that's where we are at the moment, because you think in this process, we've been through a period where loo rolls cost more than a barrel of oil, crude oil. We've got social distancing. We've got people shouting, we were too slow to go into lockdown. We've now got them shouting, we're too fast to come out. Where do we sit, and how do we make any sense of what is being told to us? We have to understand what is going on, and we have to work together. It's all about staying safe and also staying alert. So if we can stay alert, we need to know what we need to be alert to. If you think about what's happening in the economy, we started off with money. Well, it does make the world go round, we have to admit. And if you think at the moment, the government assistance plans that have been in place, who would have thought the amount of money that's been put into the economy through the bounce back loans, the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, and the larger bit, it totals £27 billion. Now, at Barclays, in 15 days, we issued 15 years worth of bounce back loans in terms of unsecured debt up to 50,000. It's huge. What is going to happen to that money? And what is it going to do to our businesses once we come out of this? What's it going to look like? We've also talked about what grants are available. The council has done an amazing job in distributing the grants for retail and leisure, and the £10,000, the 25,000, and those that didn't quite get what they wanted the first time round. There is the top-up grant scheme, so please do look at the Torbay Council and TDA. The details are all out there. Please do look to see if there's anything else you're entitled to. So, what a business. I'm very proud to announce today that we do have with us the head of probably our largest business in Torbay, and certainly the largest employer. Sir Richard Ibbotson, Chairman of Torbay and South Devon NHS Foundation Trust. Richard, I would like to welcome you to our merry bunch. And I know when you look at the screen, it does look a little bit like I don't know, Celebrity Squares, or as long as when Jim and I are on, it looks more like the Muppets. But can you tell us what it's like being the head of such a massive employer and also such a responsibility in this current condition?
Steve, thank you. Thank you. And first of all, I'm joining you from the office at Torbay Hospital. So if you hear ambulances arriving or reversing outside the door, I apologise, and don't be concerned. It happens all the time. And thank you for letting me join the webinar. I really appreciate it. And picking up what you've just said, I do think that the business community and your trust ought to be more closely aligned for a variety of reasons. We work for you. The people that we serve are also your customers and staff. And as you say, as an NHS trust, we're largely an independent business in our own right. Your trust, Torbay and South Devon, employs around 7,000 people in the region. Again, they're your customers. And it has an annual turnover of around £400 million. So I'd suggest that we probably qualify as a reasonably significant business in the footprint. You've asked me to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, if I understood you correctly, and to leave some time for questions. And Jim Parker will know that me speaking for just 10 minutes constitutes a challenge. So I'm going to work to a script to ensure I don't end up rabbiting on. Your suggestion was past, present and future. So I'll start with me, and I'll ask the first question. Why on earth have you got a retired admiral chairing your health and social care trust? Maybe it's not as daft as all that. An organisation that's part uniformed and part not. An organisation that can't be allowed to fail. An organisation that's in the public eye and one that's got a great deal of political, both small and large P, interest. And never seems to have enough dosh for its commitments. An organisation where the front line are seen as heroes and the senior management as numpties. I could go on, but am I talking about the military or the NHS? Anyway, you asked me to talk about my background first. Emily, could I have the first slide, please? I joined the Navy in the very early 70s as a university cadet. This is me with hair, pale and terrified after my first solo flight, realizing that I really didn't want to be a naval aviator. My first appointment was to a Hong Kong patrol boat, stopping illegal immigrants. Nothing much changes, does it? And I learned very little about the Navy in Hong Kong, but with the Vietnam War in full swing and Hong Kong Arrest Centre for US Marines, I learned an awful lot about life. The Navy sent me to Durham to read chemistry. Goodness knows why. So I know Durham well. I used to walk regularly at Barnard Castle, and the Prime Minister's advisor and I share the same hairstyle. There, the similarities end. Next slide, please.
Wow.
There we are. This was the view from my office window for quite a lot of my career. The gun is pointing at me, not because the gunners wanted to shoot me, but because this was in a hurricane off Bermuda, and the gun takes less damage that way around. I served in uniform during a very active period for the Royal Navy. As a youngster, I was a boarding officer searching for arms being smuggled into Northern Ireland, and I qualified as a Navy ship's diver and stayed current for 30 years thereafter. Next slide, please, Emily. This is me gingerly swimming with plastic explosive and a fuse in the Northern Gulf during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. Underwater warfare was my specialisation. So at the height of the Cold War, that meant countering the Soviet nuclear submarine threat. If you Google me, you'll see a list of unintelligible postnominals. They start with DSc, and to the confusion of my now medical colleagues, that does not mean Doctor of Science, or indeed Doctor of anything else. My Distinguished Service Cross came from doing mine clearance like this off the Kuwaiti coast during the first Gulf War. Next slide, please, Emily. I was there with an American battleship providing naval gunfire support to the troops ashore. and my little minehunter was clearing the way in front of this ship, with, as you can see, them firing over the top of us, and occasionally the Iraqis firing missiles back. So it was a bit lively, and that incidentally explains why I'm now quite deaf. Thereafter, I was both at sea and ashore during the Bosnian conflict. I was hugely fortunate to have several sea command tours thereafter, mostly in Devonport-based ships. I commanded British forces in the South Atlantic as a married accompanied post in the Falklands, which was an interesting part of my married life. You need to talk to my wife about that. And after 9/11, ended up in a NATO role with 8 nation ships and submarines working for me doing counter-terrorist work, mostly in the Mediterranean. That involved armed boardings and searches of suspect merchant ships. NATO rules were very different from British ones. The latter required me to have flag state approval before boarding, which NATO didn't need me to achieve. And the outcome for me was that I received a Meritorious Service Medal from NATO and a letter from the British Foreign Office accusing me of conducting acts of piracy on the high seas. Next slide, please, Emily. I came ashore to be the Commodore of the College at Dartmouth, which was a delightful role, before being selected for promotion to Rear Admiral. Kind of hoping there's a, there we are. What a great place that is. I retired as a Vice Admiral, as Chief of Staff Navy and Royal Marines whilst Afghanistan was very active. A Senior Warfare Officer, though I used to get letters addressed to the Senior Welfare Officer, which always raised a smile, and Deputy Commander-in-Chief. And during that last role, Steve, as you kindly said, I became a Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, which is delightfully British and old-fashioned, and it's an honour that I still find difficult to hoist in. So running big budgets and dealing with urgent operational problems was bread and butter, and I hope starts to explain why maybe it's not so daft that I'm the NHS Trust Chairman for this region. So I'll move on to the next stage of what you asked me to talk about. Emily, could I have the next slide, please? Your NHS Trust, it was the first truly integrated care organisation in England, hence it's known as an ICO, some 5 years ago now. With the exception of primary care, which is to say GPs, the Trust delivers health and social care from Dawlish to Dartmouth and up onto the moor. The acute hospital at Torbay, where I am now, is just part of what we do, albeit a very expensive one. The community hospitals in our footprint, the health and wellbeing centres, community nursing, social care delivery, they all sit with us. If we step back 5 years, the acute hospital was run by a different NHS trust from everything else I've just noted. The area's community trust was very far-sighted. It had brought community health and adult social care together, which was a new thing for the country. And it saw the next step as combining with the hospital on the hill. One of my tasks when I was recruited here was to lead our board through the acquisition of the community trust, which then led to the current ICO. And whilst the benefits of efficiency are there, and they are very significant, and having a single organisation is producing all sorts of benefits for the people that we serve, it's not just about one organisation. The reason for this slide is that the care model that comes with this is very different from the traditional one. If I showed you a traditional one, it would have the acute hospital, which is on the periphery here, right in the middle. It's on the periphery on purpose. The patient or service user, you or me, is in the middle. And one of the things that I've realised over the years that I've been involved here is that perhaps the traditional approach, which is very bed-based in terms of care delivery, is neither a particularly good idea or, frankly, long-term affordable for us as taxpayers. You really do not want to be in a hospital bed, especially an acute hospital bed, if you can possibly avoid it, especially at the moment. And the least time you spend in one, the better. Hence the model that starts to address prevention in a more determined way than the NHS has done in the past. And it's a model that pursues two mantras, and they might sound simplistic, but gosh, they mean a very different approach for the NHS. The first is that we should be asking you what matters to you, rather than just what's the matter with you, and that's quite profound. And we should acknowledge, wherever possible, that the best bed is your own bed, and we can talk about that perhaps later if you like. Turning to what we're doing right now, a couple of months ago this would have been easy, and current circumstances are anything but. We're faced with a forecast that would be managing a very large number of people needing acute support, including ventilation. You will recall the dire messages at the start of the pandemic. We made an early decision because of that to move the most vulnerable parts of our service out of the acute hospital where possible, to keep them COVID free. Those with the most challenged immune systems, so notably people undergoing things like chemo or recovering from radiotherapy, we moved them from here to Newton Abbot Hospital, and we relocated the activity that was going on there to elsewhere so that we could minimise risk for the most vulnerable. And that went really well. And to provide space to permit separate routes here in the acute for COVID and non-COVID activity, we moved some essential surgical activities, including day surgery, to Mount Stewart Hospital just down the road, and we created separate pathways here for COVID and non-COVID activity. And again, whilst this has worked pretty well and was undoubtedly the right thing to do for the projected nightmare, it's really inefficient, both in terms of staffing and real estate. We're effectively trying to run two hospitals at the moment, and it's not a good solution for the longer term in terms of management of the pandemic problem as it's now developing. You'll all have read about the Exeter Nightingale Hospital, and that will become a really valuable respiratory unit soon. And so we, together with RD&E and the Nightingale, are looking right now at the most efficient way of delivery that we can achieve for the longer term. In particular, we're wanting to restart the important elective activities, the stuff that we've had to stop these last weeks, because we're painfully aware that waiting lists are growing, and if routine activity stalls, then it inevitably becomes urgent activity at some stage. So that's current. You asked me to talk about future. Gosh, where to start? I think firstly it's important that the future isn't seen as a trust working in isolation. We're really fortunate to have an engaged and interested council who are truly supportive partners. And also the future needs to include all those that contribute to what we do. I think one of the profound changes of the ICO has been engagement with the voluntary sector. We've learned just how valuable and important this is. We've learned that voluntary does not mean free, and we're still learning and realising that in some cases, rather than the sector supporting us, in fact, they're best to lead, and we need to support them. Quick little example, I recall last year a dear old gentleman who was in his 90s living in Totnes, who was a frequent flyer at A&E. He would arrive pretty well every week, sometimes in an ambulance. And the bottom line, when we got to really sorting out the solution, was that more than anything, he was lonely. And Totnes Caring, bless him, stepped in, and he's not presented at A&E now for months and months. That's changed his quality of life out of all recognition. But learning that the voluntary sector is best to lead in some environments is quite a difficult lesson for the NHS. As technology advances and becomes ever more expensive, we need to realise that having sovereign independent trusts duplicating activity isn't either sensible or affordable. And that isn't a euphemism for us giving up or abrogating responsibility, but it does mean that we need to network more. And for things like diagnostics, for instance, we need to look at sharing resources far more than we do currently. Subsequent to our Prime Minister's visit here last autumn, we made it onto the list for hospital infrastructure replacement. And planning and delivering that is perhaps our biggest challenge and task at the moment. Simply replacing the very, very tired buildings at Torbay Hospital with new ones, but the same, would be missing an opportunity here. So work's underway, and we're involving our partners in this with the aim, as always, to do the best we can for the people we serve with the resources that are available. I think, looking at the time, Steve, I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions.
One thing, thank you, Richard. What I would like to hear about is the plans for the extension, the new side of the hospital.
The plans for what we're going to do on the hill here.
Yes.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, short term, first of all, we've had to put on hold the plans for replacing our accident and emergency unit, which were already underway. For those of you that have been to Torbay Hospital recently, you will know that there is a new main entrance, and more importantly, actually, above that, a new critical care unit. I was talking about the kit that you need as technology advances. The critical care unit here got to the stage where we'd almost got to the stage where there was room for equipment and no patients. You know, you had to shoehorn a patient into the critical care unit amongst stacks of new kit. The new CCU above the main entrance now is state of the art. The next stage of development here is to make the A&E fit for purpose. And if you've been unfortunate enough to have to use our A&E, you will realise it is in an Edwardian part of the hospital, and it is far from ideal in terms of a piece of real estate to deliver accident and emergency from. We'd started the rebuild for that when the pandemic hit. So the first thing you will see in terms of answering your question here, Steve, will be us renewing the A&E alongside the new main entrance, and that should happen just as soon as we can start building work properly again. Next, we Torbay Council, bless them, pushed through very swiftly last week planning approval for a secure ward, which we're going to build towards the top of the hill. This will belong to Devon Partnership Trust, the mental health trust for our region, but it will be a secure acute ward. And the reason that's going to be really significant is, at the moment, if Devon Partnership Trust patients need acute support and a secure environment to deliver it, sadly at the moment they're having to be sent all over the country and often a very long way from family and friends. So that's going to happen very soon. And then the final step, and the one that we're developing right now that I touched on, is to address the rebuild of what is an Edwardian hospital site. And it's delightful, you know, it's a lovely place to work, but it's entirely not fit for purpose in a modern environment, or the majority. So we're going to keep the heritage bits. There are some delightful heritage parts of the hospital, but we have to acknowledge that an awful lot of it will need replacing. The issue for us, and I'm being inclusive, I mean us, is to decide what we want here. It's grown up kind of historically rather than sensibly, and it's grown up at a time when not so far up the road at the A38, RD&E has been doing the same thing. I think there is an acknowledgement now that duplicating everything that happens on both those sites is not affordable in the long term, nor is it sensible. And for some of the stuff that isn't used permanently, but is really important, I don't know, some of the cardiology things, we can't afford as a country to duplicate the staff as much as anything. You know, we can't have cardiologists here and at RD&E when the patient load isn't supporting that level of duplication. So we have to address this, I think, in a much more networked way than we have hitherto. So you will see a change without question, but the change has got to be based on what's best for the people we serve for the future.
Thank you for that. And talking about staffing there, where generally would you source your staff from? Excuse me.
Gosh, that's another good question. Well, the great majority live in our footprint. There are very few that commute outside of Torbay and South Devon. Some do, but the great majority live here. Sadly, the great majority are not recruited from here. And perhaps the best example I've got, I'm very proud of the fact that we have a very stable, settled and happy group of Filipino nurses here, as an example. That has worked really well, not least because rather than simply bring them here and leave them to it, we've with the council been able to support their domestic arrangements and ensure that they are in appropriate accommodation and properly looked after, and that's gone down really well and works really well. So I'm proud of that. I'd be even prouder if actually there were nurses recruited from Torbay and we had a better degree of engagement in apprenticeships, which Emily's going to talk through, and we acknowledged that an employer of this size and scale needs to get a better foothold in the Bay. And there are changes afoot there, but I think, you know, there are no excuses for us. We've got universities with medical faculties, whichever direction you want to look in, right on our doorstep. We've got some jolly good schools with really good academic outcomes. We need to get far more engaged in recruiting locally for the future. That's a long-term issue. We can't sort this overnight, but there's an area there that I think we could all support and get involved in a way that we haven't done hitherto as well as we should.
I really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for that answer, because your graphic there does show very well how much this is a community-based organisation, with the hospital there looking after the more intensive cases. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you. Please do pass on our thanks to your staff, your team, because I know that maybe we haven't been hit like some areas have been, but I know that we're still braced and we're ready. And I really thank you for being the head of this unit. So thank you, Sir Richard.
Steve, thanks ever so much. Much appreciated.
Now, there's a nice segue to Emily. Emily Tucker, normally you're setting up these events for us and having to sort of cope with the phone in the background. But Emily, you are, of course, Head of Apprenticeships and Employer Engagement at South Devon College. What does that mean for you at the moment?
Yeah, hi Steve, thank you. And it's really great to be supporting this today, other than being in the background. So yeah, apprenticeships and employer engagement has been a real challenge over the past couple of months. So we saw a lot of our apprentices going into furlough, naturally, businesses using that initiative. We've been providing a lot of support to employers and our apprentices during this time, focusing on supporting them with online learning. So as you can probably imagine, the college have completely embraced the digital transformation, and that's probably accelerated massively to support all of our students and apprentices with the online learning. During the time of furlough, our apprentices have been working hard still to achieve their qualification. So they've been working towards their 20% off the job. So delivery has still very much taken place and continued. And we are starting now to see that those apprentices that were furloughed are being reintroduced into their employment, which is obviously very, very good, very positive news for us. There's lots of opportunities with apprenticeships, especially in this time. We see that apprenticeships could be a really great opportunity to support businesses, local business, small businesses, larger levy paying businesses. And there are some really key initiatives at the moment out there. So I won't go into huge amounts of detail right now, because there is a lot of detail, unfortunately, with all of these things. But just in summary, if you're an SME, so if you're a small business and you're looking to take on an apprentice, the government have introduced the digital account to SMEs, and there is an initiative there. So the cost of the apprenticeship training may well be funded through that apprenticeship digital account. But this is in pilot stage, so it's only for the next 12 months. So if anyone is keen to take up that opportunity or find out more, then please get in contact with us. We can talk that through with you. And likewise, if you're a levy payer, it makes absolute sense to spend your levy. Do not lose it. You know that you have a limited time to spend it, and the opportunity is there for you. And we are here to help you. If you want to contact us, it's employers@southdevon.ac.uk, and we can talk you through all of those things. So that's pretty much where we are, Steve, what we've been doing to support. Obviously, we've launched the South Devon Business Community webinars, recognising that this was going to be an opportunity to reach out to our business community whilst we're not all out networking and meeting one another face to face, which, me being me, I miss, and I know Steve does as well. The webinars have given us a great opportunity to make sure that still continues, but in a different way. So our next webinar is actually straight after this. So sorry, Steve. Steve's on that as well. So we've got a real run this morning of webinars, and then we are doing an apprenticeship special as well on the 12th, I believe. So if you are interested in apprenticeships, then there will be a webinar. It is the 12th, I'm pretty sure. But we have one of our apprentice ambassadors joining that one. We've got the chair of the Torbay Torbay Southwest Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, and someone from representing the ESFA and apprenticeships nationally. So that one might be worthwhile a watch. So that's me in summary, Steve, unless you've got any further questions.
No, I think it's great what you're doing, because as you know, I'm a big supporter of the apprenticeship programme and South Devon College, and we couldn't produce these webinars if it hadn't been for yourself facilitating and the backup support from South Devon College. So thank you for keeping Torbay Business Forum going in this time, because there's no more shaking hands. I mean, in fact, we're going to talk about breakfast now, because I think we can go to Jim in the kitchen, but I'm going to keep him at arm's length. So I'm not sure where you are, Jim. I think you're over there. So thank you, Emily. Jim, what's happening in the kitchen?
In the kitchen. Well, today the word local has been used by Sir Richard, Emily, and you a lot this morning, and it's been the main word for a few weeks now, and it's the local community in Torbay putting together as never before. And I know we've got a Keep It Local Torbay campaign which will get off the ground, and there's one gentleman who's now started his own business which is based on local suppliers supplying local people. I met James Arnold from Bay Liveries a few weeks ago, and his model has really taken off. So I'd like to go to James to explain why local is key to his new business and key to the future in Torbay. James Arnold.
Thanks, Jim. Well, first of all, a big thank you to Steve and Emily for inviting me. And I start with the conclusion as opposed to the introduction. So the conclusion is that what we are trying to do is drive the Torbay pound. So drive the Torbay pound either by getting people to shop locally with local suppliers and local businesses, or alternately to get people who aren't local to have access to Torbay suppliers and local businesses. So I'll come back to that conclusion, but always good to know where you're going, and where you're going to finish. I'm very new to the forum, very new to talking to businesses in Torbay. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of an introduction around me and the team I'm working with. little bit about who we are, what we're up to, and then finishing up with what we're looking to do. So who am I? Well, I've been living down here in Torbay now for a little over 10 years. My wife was born and grew up very local, actually, in Preston, married with 2 young kids, and I've been a weekly commuter now for a little over 10 years. So some of you may well know me from the 6:03 or 6:04, whatever it is, on a Monday morning out of Torquay train station on its way to London Paddington. I started my career with Procter & Gamble. I held lots of different roles there on brands like Ariel, Bold, Daz, Fairy, Max Factor, all sorts of pieces, mainly based out in Switzerland and across Europe, and a bit of time out in the Middle East and the States. I came up to the UK and I was head of marketing with Premier Foods. So at the time, I don't think they still are, but at the time, Premier Foods was the UK's largest food company. So brands like Hovis, Mr. Kipling, Sharwood's, Lloyd Grossman, Hartley's Jam, to name but a few. From there, I actually went to Burton's Foods, which isn't on here. So I launched Cadbury's and Cadbury's cookies in particular into supermarkets. So I'm not taking all the responsibility for the obesity challenge, Sir Richard, but I might take a little bit of it, I'm afraid. From there, I went into a very different world. So acquisition and retention. So how do you bring customers into a service organization, and how do you keep them? So I was head of innovation and director of advertising, brands and brand experience with SSE, which is one of the big energy companies. So from utilities, I then moved into retail. So I ran the marketing for Halfords. So that was everything from the corporate marketing, working closely with investors, city, private equity, etc., but also all their digital work. So Halfords as a group owns Halfords Retail. It also owns Halfords Auto Centres, so the garages where you can get your MOT or car service, Treads, which is an online bike company, and also Cycle Republic. From Halfords, I went to B&Q. I did a couple of stints at B&Q, one as director of communications, and then secondly, B&Q is owned by a company called Kingfisher, which is a European company. And there I've been leading the global communications, social, digital, and other bits and pieces. So, and I've got a couple of non-exec roles over the years as well. So my background is all marketing. I'm a data, digital, marketing type person. That's what I kind of get up for in the morning from a professional point of view. It's what I go to sleep about thinking in the evenings. If I move on to the next slide, please, Emily. And broadly, the team who I'm working with have got a similar background. So a couple of those are still in their day jobs, so I can't quite say who they are because the likes of Google might get quite upset. But we have a very friendly lady who is at Google at the moment. We have a lady who has been at Facebook a couple of times in terms of working for them. We have the guy who led the BT change program into digital and also the acceleration of digital in Channel 4. Colleagues coming out of Samsung, Sainsbury's, which is quite helpful in terms of getting the right range and the right operational setup. And because us marketeers tend to get a little bit carried away, we also have a commercial barrister on the team to keep us on the straight and narrow. Who else on the team? Well, I'm delighted to say that Jim and Archant with the Torbay Weekly have been brilliant in terms of launch partners. Another time I can show you exactly what the impact has been in terms of how many people have come to our site, how many people have bought from us as a result of Jim's support. So I definitely owe Jim a coffee or a bottle of gin at some stage, but it's been really good. And we're also seeing increasing support from the TDA, which is fantastic. But perhaps at this stage, most importantly, are the 30 to 40 local companies who've got on board. So whilst I can talk at length about all sorts of things I've done in my previous career, that all counts for nothing if you can't get in the trust of the local businesses. So we have 30 to 40 local food and drink suppliers. They're on our website now, and we are selling their products. So we're selling their products together with a range of other products, which I will talk about now. Emily, please. So if you're wondering who we are, well, to a customer, we are a local online supermarket. You can order online, looking at the top left. We have a website which is up and running. We have 2-hour delivery slots. We're fulfilling your orders with exactly the same vans and trucks and logistics as a very well-known supermarket, but I've just mentioned. We have no minimum order, so we can get out on a regular basis. If you want to buy a packet of, actually we don't stock polos, if you wanted to buy a packet of polos that we don't stock, you could buy that and we'll deliver that to your door. So we don't mind if you're buying £2 or as an order came through yesterday for well over £100. It's up to you. And the system is as simple to use and probably a better user experience than some of the main retailers. But what is the real big difference in terms of what we're doing is we're not trying to go head to head with a Tesco's or Sainsbury's. We're not going head to head with local high street delis or shops. What we're doing is pulling together a range of local products. So we have local meat, we have bricks and fresh fish, we have local fruit, local vegetables, local drinks, particularly alcoholic drinks, with a little bit of a surround in terms of essential brands, and we get these all to your door. So as a customer, we have two things. One is If you rewind 30, 40 years, you'd go down the high street and you'd buy from the butchers, you'd buy from the fishmongers, you'd buy from the bakers. Very, very few people do that these days for all the reasons that we know. What we're doing is pulling that range together and providing a new channel to market for local businesses and local suppliers. And from a customer point of view, on top of being able to get these local products, it's convenient. So you can sit at home in the evening watching Emmerdale, EastEnders, whatever it might be, and you can do your shopping and be supporting local products and local community at the same time. I'll give you two interesting facts that we've already seen. The average purchase I'm seeing at the moment come through has somewhere between 4 and 5 local businesses in there. So whether that's a combination of butchers, fresh fish, bakery, alcohol, etc., let's not worry too much about who they are, but the average purchase is supporting 4 or 5 local businesses. So particularly as we scale, at the moment we haven't really started our marketing campaign, but as we start to scale, what we hope is that impact in terms of a Torbay pound continues to grow. Next slide, please, Emily. So I suppose the question is, so what? So if I'm sitting here listening to this, why do I actually care about about this online supermarket? So first of all, I say, well, please care, please come and shop with us. We have a very nice range, we have very nice vans, very nice drivers. I have a list of 25 drivers wanting to work for us. Thanks for Jim. And the more people who come and shop with us, the better. So that's the first piece. I suppose the second reason I'd ask why people should care about us is, if you are a local food and drink supplier, get in touch. So we are here as a new route to market. And in particular, our plan is not to stop in terms of TQ3, but what really interests us is, so when we get the range absolutely right and the range is full, how do we then take this model and export it? So if you're a local food and drink supplier, don't think of us as you're going to be supplying just into TQ1, 2, 3, and 4. Think of us as, over time, this is a way to actually get my product, get my brand to a very large audience across the region and beyond. The third reason I'd say, in answer to the so what question, is this. To the customer, we are an online supermarket. We're an online supermarket that's easy to shop. There's all your key products and all the essential brands. However, behind the scenes is actually a very, very high-tech platform. So some of the technology which exists there, most of which isn't switched on yet, are things like predictive analysis, things like anticipatory analysis. So what that means is, if you're a marketing person like me, it becomes very interesting. But as a customer, it means when you come onto our site, if 2 people come onto the site from 2 different houses, in say one in Bricks and one in Torquay, in time, we'll be showing you 2 different websites. We'll be showing you 2 different product ranges. And that will be based on both what you've been looking at on our site, but also the data that's being pulled in terms of what exists outside. So a good example being, our platform doesn't know that there's a heat wave going on, but it does know that lots more people are searching for ice cream on Google, and therefore it's starting to pull through all the ice cream onto the home page. When it starts to rain in a few days' time, it'll flip and it'll suddenly start talking, I hope, about hot chocolate and coffee and tea. So in terms of the data and the tech that sits behind it, this is the same sort of tech which major retailers have, which Amazon and people like that are using. And so again, it means that your product we're going to put in front of the right person at the right time with the right message. So that's where I think it starts to become interesting for local businesses. And if I move on, Emily, to, I think this is the last slide or the penultimate slide, the question then becomes, what if? So it's one thing saying we want to be a local online supermarket. We're going to be delivering fruit, veg, meat, fish, and all sorts of different pieces to local postcodes. If we put another layer on top, as I've said, and say we want to take that further afield, perhaps as far as Newton Abbot or Exeter or across the region or to Glasgow, that becomes interesting if you're a local food and drink supplier again. But what if actually our vision is to go one step further than that? So next slide, Emily. What if actually the vision is to say, well, with all of this data which we're starting to pull in, and all of the data which we're starting to be able to look at in terms of how people are acting, how people are behaving, how does this support other businesses? So, for example, I know Mark's going to be telling us in a minute about Majestic and about holidays. I already know that about 6.3% of visitors coming to my site are currently in market for holidays at the current moment. So what about if I'm able to target those people, those individuals, with adverts from Mark's business? What about if you're a building company? I can tell you that, I'll check my number here, about 4.5% are planning on doing an extension. So again, the opportunity here is not just around an online food and drink company, albeit that's what we're doing at the moment. What we're hoping to do is build the capability behind this to actually become much more of a portal to drive the local economy and bring back that Torbay pound. So I said at the start, the way to look at what we're doing is it's all about how can you shop local, how can you drive a Torbay pound, I'm really, really pleased that together with the Torbay Weekly, this business forum, but also increasing support from the TDA, we're really looking actually how can we use this in a much bigger way to drive the local economy and drive the Torbay pound a lot harder. So that's it from me. Very nice to meet you all. I said, please like us, please subscribe to us with our newsletter, please buy from us, that would be nice as well. And if you are a local supplier, please get in touch because we are expanding the range pretty much on a daily basis. But thanks very much, and thanks very much for the invite.
Thanks, James. I think you can all realise now why the forum and the working party has been talking to James to try and find a way of linking up with what he's doing. What he's doing is, it's just local, and it's using data to drive traffic to his site. And hopefully, the next stage is to try and get some guinea pigs on board, where we can try and find a way of making that work with our Keep It Local Torbay campaign. So brilliant, James, and I wish you all the best. I'm sure we all do for the future. James mentioned Mark Wright, another local company from Majestic Holidays. Mark, welcome. I know a lot of your business is based on data, and you've been going for quite a while in South Devon. How long, Mr. Wright?
Wow, we've been going since 1984, so we're 36 years trading as a family business. So
And
I can give you a lowdown on that.
Sorry, I remember, was it formed by your dad, Jim? Is that correct? Back in 1648 when I first met him?
It could go back some time. Yeah, that's right. We a little bit of a background about us then and how we started, because that will give you a bit of an insight into why we're still here, and we will be here in the future, and that's one of the key things. Yes, we used to have our family's always been in the leisure trade. We've had, my dad used to have before I was born, a number of large bingo clubs in Scotland, big 2,000, 3,000 seater bingo halls, and they were huge. And that could have grown, but unfortunately he was unwilling to pay the protection rings of Glasgow, and he didn't take insurance on the buildings either, and they burnt his bingo clubs down. So he did have a very large multi-million-pound business back in the 60s, but he was taken out. And as he was English, he wasn't well liked in Scotland, so he had to do a runner back to his hometown of Manchester, and start a different career. But then later on in life, we've been involved in hotels. My family, my uncles had hotels. We moved to Teignmouth back in the mid-1970s. My uncle had bought the Royal Hotel in Teignmouth. It's a lovely hotel, now sadly retirement homes in Teignmouth. And we had a theatre. We operated that for several years. It didn't make any money, but it was a lifestyle business. It paid the weekly shop. My uncle then bought a hotel in Bournemouth, and that hotel was the Majestic Hotel in Bournemouth. My uncle then went on to work on cruise ships, and my dad would go up and look after the hotel in the winter. He saw it was empty and thought he needed to do something, and he did some readers' offers. They were the first readers' offers. He approached the Herald Express, and he said, I've got a hotel in the winter, I need to fill it. I'll give you some great offers. If you do vouchers for your customers, and they collect a newspaper each night and a voucher, at the end of the week, they're entitled to a £49 5-day holiday in Bournemouth by coach. And there's no money in it, but it filled the hotel in a quiet time. And it was good for the newspapers because it encouraged people to buy over a 6-night period. And that worked really well, and that was the Majestic, and he created the holiday Majestic Tours, and the first Majestic Tours went to Bournemouth in 1984. My uncle then came back from doing cruise ships in British Columbia, and he then decided to grow the hotels in Bournemouth, and he went from one hotel. We had 4 hotels as a family business in Bournemouth, and then in the late 80s he decided to sell up, and he sold the Majestic, went to Shearing's Holidays. So he sold the Majestic Hotel, he sold these other hotels for development, and we were left back with a theatre, making no money. So my dad had a customer base and thought, well, we need to do something. And he asked what kind of product they would like, and he talked with his customers, and he came up with some ideas, and he did the first tours to Emmerdale Farm in Yorkshire, and they were really popular. And I said, what else do you do? So he introduced Blackpool Illuminations, and he just contracted a hotel space. At that time, I was studying physics. I'm like you, James. I love data. I love analysis. That's what I live for on a daily basis. And I came back and finished my degree in '85. And my dad needed help. We were operating from home, from a spare bedroom, and we had to answer the phones. So we operated from home for a year and a half. And then we got an office in Teignmouth and started to expand. And we expanded the product, introducing new destinations in Eastbourne and London, and the business grew. But very much from the start, we've been a very risk-averse family. I had my first credit card debt of about £640, or actually it was £642 on an Access card when I was a student, and I suddenly realized I was paying £20 a month in interest, and I was going to go, this is going to cost me at the end of the year £240 to have £642 of debt. And it terrified me. I thought, this is not the way forward. So I quickly paid off the credit card as soon as I was able to, and vowed never to spend what I didn't have in my pocket. And that's been a kind of a mantra through our business over the years. We've grown, and we've reinvested each year's money. We took one loan out back in '91 to buy the Templestowe Hotel in Torquay, because we couldn't get the product we wanted in Torquay, and yet there was a high demand for coach holidays into the Bay. So we did borrow with Barclays. Thank you very much, Steve. Your earlier incarnations funded us in, but as quickly as we could, we paid off the debt, so that we're a debt-free business. And that's allowed us over the years to get to a situation where we are now, where sadly the tap has been turned and there is no income. And a lot of our fellow businesses, unfortunately, live by debt. They've expanded maybe too quickly. They have to take debt on leases of coaches, and it's meant that there's come a point now where they don't have an income to pay for those, and that's been quite a sad state of affairs. We've always traded because we didn't want to take risk. We've always operated a client's trust account, which I thought was quite a safe way. So people, when they buy a holiday, the money goes into a client's trust, and we don't touch that till after they've come back from their holiday. We can't have access to that. So where we have to make advance payments on their behalf to a hotel or a theatre, we've paid that out of previous year's income that's built up over the years. It's previous year's profits that we haven't taken out. So that's enabled us in the current circumstances, when we were told to close the doors 3 months ago, to literally just refund everyone that had an advanced holiday. So that's been a big fear for a lot of our old people. Our client base is over 70, majority are over 70, certainly on the coach holidays, and they're very uncertain and they want their money back. Now, I thought that was probably more widely spread than it is in the trade. Most companies take a bond with, there's two main ones. There's one everyone knows, which is ABTA, or also ATOL for the fly tours, and they have bonded coach holidays. And what that's enabled them to do is they pay a fee each year to protect their business in financial failure. But it has enabled them to use the client's money to fund their business. So they take deposits in and they use that for operations. They use that for the day-to-day. They use it for their marketing. And so suddenly, when it's come to a crunch now, where they have to refund those monies, they've spent it. Unfortunately, it's no longer there, and that's what's put a lot of coach companies to the edge, or indeed, unfortunately, where they've had to cease operations. I say we're strong because we have built up over several years quite a nice healthy balance sheet, so we're going to be there and come back. But it is that aversion to risk. I certainly wouldn't risk spending clients' money, so we're in a good position. Talking to the clients themselves, because they're mostly over 70, we find that a vast majority are unwilling to travel until there's a vaccine. Thankfully, over the years, we've been moving to a younger market, maybe a 50 to 70 market. They're a little bit more willing to take a risk, and they're willing to self-drive. They don't necessarily need the coach holiday. They like the independence. And we're filling a gap where hotels can't get to people. We're a good marketing company because I'm into the data. We're using the newspapers. And so we can help these hotels get to market. It has been a problem because newspaper circulation has been declining, as I've always been having a bit of a moan with you at Jim, as beyond your control, and it's been a nightmare. And the whole coach industry has relied on newspaper advertising, and that has been going down. And the graph, and I'd love to have one of your lovely little slides there, Emily, but I didn't send one because I've got bucket loads of slides. The graph shows passenger volumes decreasing in line with newspaper circulation. And that's what's wonderful about having the Torbay Weekly. That's now going to enable us to grow again by getting our product in front of people. People don't know they want a holiday to Emmerdale Farm until they see it. They don't type in, "I'd like a holiday to Yorkshire, Emmerdale, please." But when they see it, they go, "Oh, you know, it's prompted sales." So your paper and hopefully its growth into other towns could be a saviour for the likes of us and other businesses to get to people.
Thanks, Mark, for that bit of confidence, and no pressure on the weekly. I'm sure we'll do that. Marvellous story how you've grown from those roots to where you are now. Just an impression of what you've gone through as a company in the holiday trade at the moment. You mentioned shearings that got under, unfortunately. Can you say how many holidays you've repaid since March? Just give some idea of the amount of holidays that you've had to give money.
We literally, when the Chancellor announced that, you know, travel restrictions, boom, you can't leave your home, we cancelled, and that was a middle of March, and we just closed the doors overnight. And then, unfortunately, I've had to do all the refunds myself because, you know, there's no income and all staff on furlough. But we've been going into the office, me and my wife, we've been getting in touch with the customers, and I've been refunding away. And so far, we've refunded £1.5 million, and I'm now looking at August. It's an unknown. You know, we haven't been told hotels can open yet for trade other than essential workers. A lot of hotels are looking at opening the 4th of July, but there's no instruction from the government that we'll be able to do that. We're therefore planning from the 3rd of August. But I have refunded everyone up through to the end of July. It's just over 15,000 holidays, and it's really hard to do because to get those customers, we did advanced marketing. So we'd spent £150,000 on brochure, we'd spent £150,000 on newspaper advertising, and then we've got the staff in the office of 200,000. So we've spent £500,000, which is gone. We'll never see that money again. But the clients are loyal. They do want their money back, but they do say they'll book with us again. And customers that are stuck with other holiday companies that are not getting their refunds because the money's not in the kitty are saying, well, we will be traveling with Majestic in the future. So I'm quite excited for the growth prospects for our company. And particularly when we're talking to customers, huge demand for Torbay. Out of all the resorts that we do, Bournemouth, Eastbourne, Scarborough, Llandudno, the largest demand is for the Bay. It's got a real following amongst the older people, and as it's developing, Torquay is improving as its new buildings are coming in, and there's investment. You see the Belgrave Sands, and people are investing in their hotels and upgrading. Just like the hospital, we have to move away from the Edwardian Victorian buildings. People expect more. We're having to deliver that, but there is a good pent-up demand for Torbay, and I think that's where we're going to see our first surge on our sales. It will be the Bay.
Mark, thanks ever so much for that insight into what you've gone through as a company, and we really applaud how you treated people and wish you all the best for the future. And one last question: when can I go abroad on holiday?
Well, it depends on your risk aversion again. I would happily go. I'd go next month, but I won't be allowed back in then, will I? Have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then I can't do refunds. It's only me that can sign the checks.
But as you say, Torbay first. Thanks for your time, Mark. I'm going to hand back to somebody who's got some ridiculous glasses on now. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Well, thank you, Jim. I should be on that holiday with you because I think, Mark, what you've done there is admirable. And as I say, the future's so bright. I got to wear shades. But never mind, I might even play you out on that one. I can hear the rapturous applause in the background, and the laughter is great. But, well, we've hit our time slot, so thank you so much to everybody on our panel today. Sir Richard Ibbotson, Emily Tucker, James Arnold, and Mark Wright, also ably supported by Jim in the kitchen. But a big thank you today as well to Mark Salmon of SSG Training Consulting, who is our sponsor of this event. Torbay Business Forum does rely on its sponsors to get through, especially as we're no longer selling breakfast at £12.50 a go. So the sponsorship is the key to our success. I'm loving having the ability to do these events and provide it like this. It saves travel to work, doesn't it? You can get on with your job in a minute. Thank you, Emily, for facilitating. It's been brilliant. Also want to thank Angela from IMS Marketing for managing all of our Facebook and LinkedIn posts. I'm sorry if we bombard you with these, but we had 66 people on the call today, which is excellent. Thank you very much, because I know these are uncertain times as we emerge from lockdown. But I wish you all well. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. We'll let you know the exact date. I'll play you out. And we will see you very soon. Thank you, Torbay. Have a great time.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Teacher, he wears dark glasses. Things are going great.